So first topic up, we have, I think, just something to celebrate, and a little bit of a narrative shift, if you will, although things can change. I think this, the fact that we're talking about $2 billion films here, when a couple years ago, even a year ago, we were talking about how Disney is dead. And granted, there are still those who would say Disney is dead in the water and these are just flukes and aberrations, and we'll talk about that. But, we're here to talk about Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine and their huge box office success and box office milestones and what this means for Disney. So, if you're one of the only people who hasn't seen either Inside Out 2 or Deadpool and Wolverine, and I mean that in jest, but I also kind of mean it seriously because it seems like nobody who watches movies has not seen these two films, and I'm going to read out some numbers to you that explain why that is. But Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine, these are the two, really arguably the two of the bigger films that were coming out this summer in general. Right, I think Disney had a point in saying, okay, Marvel, which has been on a little bit of a downtrend recently. And even, critically, if you disagree, like if you really enjoy all the projects, that's great. That's awesome. I've done plenty of videos on all the different projects that have come out in phases 4 and 5 and, varying thoughts on all of them, but I enjoy most of them, but still not to the extent that I did the Infinity Saga. But still, I think even, you'd have to acknowledge the facts, the objective facts. We're not talking about now our thoughts on these films, but just the box office, right? The box office has been declining. And obviously a pandemic was a huge part of it. But, we did have little hits here and there, obviously, and I say little, facetiously. Doctor Strange 2 made $900 million. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 made $800 million. Spider-Man No Way Home almost made $2 billion. So, Marvel has had its wins, but then you have the Marvels and your Thor: Love and Thunders and your Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanias of the world, and so it was a big question, right? Could Marvel kind of get back on the right track, especially with some interesting films coming up like Captain America: Brave New World? Sorry, not Captain America. Yeah, but Captain America: Brave New World. I keep getting the titles, the old title and the new title mixed up. Captain America: Brave New World coming out soon, and then Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four: First Step. So it's exciting, but it's also it's kind of a wait and see period for Marvel. So then they released Deadpool and Wolverine. We'll talk about the box office of that in just a second. On the flip side, with Pixar, with Inside Out 2, you had a film that, well, I think myself included, because I've mentioned on the channel before, Inside Out 1 is one of my favorite films of all time. I love this film to death. I think that it's one of the shining examples of how you make a film for everybody and not just, pander, but actually make a film that children can love, but also adults can really dive into the themes of sadness and emotion. And so to say that, we're going to make a sequel it just jarred me a little bit, because it was like, you can't make a sequel to that. Turns out you can. And turns out not only did I love Inside Out 2, I want Inside Out 3. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I liked Toy Story 4 a lot, actually, even though I was one of the people who said, why in the world are we making Toy Story 4? I'm not clamoring for Toy Story 5, yet here we are, we're going to get a Toy Story 5. So it's a little bit of a different case in that regard. Before these two films came out, I was of two different minds with both Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool and Wolverine, and I made a predictions video. That's part of the fun of having a YouTube channel and a podcast, is that you can go back, in the records. You can look at all the previous podcast episodes. I have everything set here. I'm not here to pretend or to bluster. I make predictions and I'm wrong, usually a lot of the time. But one of the predictions I made before Deadpool and Wolverine was that it would make $1 billion. And I don't think that was a super bold prediction. I just think it was something that, we'll have to see. But I was very confident in that. Sure enough, Deadpool and Wolverine has made over $1 billion and is doing quite well for itself. It was actually recently, again, #1 at the box office, which is incredible over the weekend. But Inside Out 2, the first Inside Out, I believe, made something like $600 or $700 million. It was very, very successful for a film, especially for a first-time original animated film from Pixar, even though Pixar does usually do pretty well. To say that I would have expected something like $1 billion from Inside Out 2, I would have given it maybe a 5% chance. I would have said I would love it if it happened, and I do love that it did happen, but there's just no way. Because, who is coming out to see Inside Out 2 that hadn't seen Inside Out 1? And, what is the repeat value that it would get to $1 billion? When, this is a film that didn't need to make $1 billion to be successful, quite frankly. I think that that's what set my expectations a lot lower, was the fact that I said, well, Inside Out 2, if it makes $1 billion, that's awesome, but it needed to make maybe like $700 million to be successful, and that was great for it. So here are the numbers, right? And I want to talk about the numbers for a little bit, and then I want to talk about Disney in general, because I want to see, I want to talk about whether or not this means Disney is back, quote unquote. But here are the numbers. Inside Out 2 is the number 1 grossing film of the year. Deadpool and Wolverine is the number 2 grossing film of the year. And these are worldwide numbers, by the way. Although I believe domestically, they should be pretty close to 1 and 2, if not 1 and 2 themselves. Inside Out 2 is currently the number 9 grossing film of all time worldwide at $1.668 billion. Wrap your head around that. This film has made more than the Avengers, and it's made more, scratch that, than basically every single MCU film except for the 2 Avengers films, Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And Spider-Man No Way Home, I guess, to be fair. But that's a Sony film. But it's made more than, I don't know, like think of almost all of your favorite films. It's made more than the Lord of the Rings films, all the Harry Potter films, a lot. In fact, I think every single Pixar film, yeah, because Toy Story 3 is the next one, I think, at 1.1 or 1.2 billion. It's incredible. Inside Out 2 is the number 9 grossing film ever worldwide. It's beat out Star Wars films like The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, which both made over $1 billion, Rogue One as well. It's actually incredible what it's been able to do. And the reason that part of the reason we're bringing it up is because it just recently became officially, and I know that there's some debate about this, it just officially became the number 1 animated film of all time worldwide. The reason I say that is because technically, on a technicality, there are 2 ways to look at this in my opinion. The technical and, yes, I guess the legalistic, real interpretation of the number 2 film animated is The Lion King, which is the 2019 Lion King, not the 1993, I believe 1994 version of The Lion King. Could be wrong about that. But it's the 2019 version of The Lion King, which is animated in the sense that it's entirely CGI, except for one shot of the film. But, I would buy into that as, sort of the technical, legalistic answer to that question. So yes, Inside Out 2, for all intents and purposes, has beat out the number 2 animated film of all time, which is The Lion King, which is at $1.652 billion. Also, just incredible how many people saw that movie. And also, the prequel's coming out. Mufasa, The Lion King, is coming out in just a couple months, so that's interesting. But, if you wanted to kind of go by the spirit, like CG, not CG animated, because Lion King is also CG animated, but you know what I mean, like sort of the traditional kind of animated style, it had already long passed the previous record holder of that kind of animation, which is Frozen 2, which is number 14, also incredible. Number 14 all time at $1.453 billion. So Disney just killing it out here with its animation. But Inside Out 2 dethrones them all. And by the way, I mean, just what an amazing film. I think that, I was so shocked to hear that it made $1.66 billion. But honestly, aside from maybe even the first Inside Out film, this is one of the most deserving animated films to ever make this much money. I'm just really happy, honestly, more than the money, that this many people went out to see Inside Out 2. It's truly remarkable. So hats off to Inside Out 2. It's really great. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine is competing with a lot of MCU films, right? And it's still managing to beat out most of them. I think the only MCU films that it is under right now, and it probably won't go too much higher than where it is right now, but it's under, obviously, Avengers Endgame, number 1, Avengers Infinity War, number 2, and you have Spider-Man No Way Home, and then I believe the first Avengers, the first Avengers at 1.5 or 1.6 billion, and then followed by Civil War, I believe. I believe actually it's past Civil War, or it's about to pass Civil War if it hasn't already. But I think also Avengers Age of Ultron, I said, is up there. Iron Man 3, I think it just passed. So it's getting up there in the ranks of all of these. And by all of, I really mean all of these billion-dollar MCU films. I mean, in the Infinity Saga alone, Captain Marvel, Black Panther, obviously all the Avengers films have made over $1 billion, and 2 of them made over $2 billion. So it's incredible. But still, despite all of that, Deadpool and Wolverine is at number 23 all time of the worldwide box office charts at $1.266 billion. And honestly, who's to say it can't hit 1.3? Probably won't. I mean, almost definitely won't. But, I checked AMC the other day. It's still playing in theaters near me, in pretty big theaters near me. And so I thought, yeah, I mean, is it likely it's going to hit 1.3? No. Does it need to hit 1.3 to be successful? No, because it's already insanely successful. And think about this, guys. And maybe not many, because the 2 times I went to see Deadpool and Wolverine, I believe both times there were children in the audience. So take this for what you will. Because I do think a lot of children did go to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Whether or not that was good parenting, I leave that up for debate in the comments down below. But regardless of that, there is a segment of the population that would have gone to Deadpool and Wolverine had it been PG or PG-13, and would have gone over and over again, because you can take your kid. I would wager to about 75% of the MCU films and feel pretty safe about it. I mean, like Winter Soldier, you know, maybe a little bit too violent for maybe a younger child or something like that. But, you know, like a Thor Ragnarok, I think you can take a 10 or 12-year-old. So anyways, point being is that there's a good chunk of the population that didn't buy tickets. I mean, parents included, taking those kids to see Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm sure they'll watch it eventually. But yeah, I mean, it's just incredible that there's that much of a you know, kind of a hurdle that it had to climb as the first R-rated MCU film. For comparison, by the way, the only other billion-dollar rated R film is Joker, and also timely, you know, speaking of Lion King having Mufasa coming out soon. Joker 2, Folie Deux, is coming out in just a couple weeks, so we'll talk about Joker 2. Joker 2 is going to be the headliner of today's podcast because I just find this saga so interesting and fascinating with the reviews. But, you know, Joker 2 is coming out soon, but Joker 1 just surprised everyone. It's number 39 overall in the worldwide box office, sitting at $1.078 billion. So just really remarkable. Now, as we close out this segment of the podcast, just want to talk quickly about Disney in general, because a couple years ago, you know, post-pandemic, post-Bob Chapek, Disney was in a bad spot. You know, it's still not in a great spot in terms of its content. I mean, Marvel is still trying to get it back together. I think they're heading in the right direction. And, you know, Thunderbolts, Cap 4, Fantastic Four look like really purposeful, kind of feel more like the phases 1, 2, and 3 kind of MCU films. Agatha, Ironheart, Wonder Man, you know, a little wavering a little bit on that, but we'll see about that. Pixar, I think, is really headed in a great direction. Where I talked about this when Incredibles 3 was announced. I think it's a great direction to be heading, where you have one original film, one sequel, one original film, one sequel, and you just kind of alternate like that. They're so good at both now. Whereas, you know, if it was just sequels, it'd be like, okay, you know, let's kind of slow down a little bit there. But it's I think doing these original films in between is a really good thing. So I think Pixar is headed in a good direction. Star Wars, I'm not convinced. I think as long as Kathleen Kennedy is still making creative decisions over there, or of what to greenlight and who to fire and things like that, I'm not convinced that Star Wars is headed in a good direction for a while. You'll have to, you know, show me a couple really good theatrical films and a couple really good shows to convince me that Star Wars is heading in the right direction. But there's always hope, right? A new hope, you know, no pun intended. Pun intended. What am I saying? Who am I kidding? But yeah, I mean, I think that what this proves to me, right, what this shows to me, is that things change really quickly. A year ago, like I said, Disney was in a very bad spot. And now, you know, they are ruling the box office. Does this mean that Disney is back? I don't think so. I think that, again, things can change immediately. If Cap 4 bombs, right? If Toy Story 5 bombs. I don't think Toy Story 5 is coming out next year. I think it's coming out in 2026. But, you know, just as an example, right? If Moana 2 bombs, Zootopia 2 bombs, and they're bad and they look like cheap sequels that nobody really asked for, but Disney greenlit to try to make money, then yeah, Disney's going to be right back at square one. I mean, Mufasa and Snow White, you know, kind of have me a little bit nervous because it's like, okay, you know, we're kind of heading back to that live action remake. Well, we'll see about that. But again, I think that it's still a really good, encouraging sign. You'd obviously rather have this than the alternative. And I think it's just a lesson to say that we can get excited for any given year. You know, it's not just like it doesn't have to be that, you know, Disney is sinking and then you know, Deadpool and Wolverine comes out and nobody watches it because of Disney. It's like, no, I mean, Marvel can be in a not as great place, and I'm sure Deadpool and Wolverine could have made more money if it came out around Endgame for sure. But I think the bottom line here is that, you know, I think we're headed in a better direction. And I think that there's only hope that can continue to bring us up. So let me know in the comments down below if you think Disney is headed in the right direction and what you think about these two, in my opinion, fantastic films, Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine, making over $1 billion very easily. Let me know in the comments down